Hi everyone, welcome back to another week on the Brush by Brandy YouTube channel. We are sitting here in my own personal living room, and this year I've been trying to immerse myself in the holiday spirit, and one way I've been doing that is by doing holiday projects. And one thing I wanted to do is go ahead and add some really pretty gift wrapping to my packages this year. So I am going to show you guys how I made some homemade gift wrap on here. And then I added some package tags just using some molds. This is all using some products from Redesign with Prima. And I find that doing some holiday projects like this absolutely makes me feel more in the holiday spirit. It gets the excitement going. It gets my whole house decorated. So, and it kind of brings that mood into our whole house. So along with our tree, we've got some pretty wrapped gifts. Let's go ahead and get started and get making this paper. For this project, I just pulled out a roll of plain brown paper that I had in my stash of papers, and I've used this for quite a few different things, but this time I'm going to pull out my stamps from Redesign with Prima, and I'm going to make a custom printed paper. The first thing you need to do when you're using the stamps is you want to pull them off the package. It's going to be kind of hard to rip them off, and you're going to feel like you might tear your stamp, but you're not going to, I assure you. And the first thing you want to do is go ahead and prime the stamp, and that means I'm going to take a sanding block and I'm going to lightly sand over the top of the stamp. This is just going to give some tooth to the top of the stamp so it has something to bite onto. At first I thought I would just use some plain little craft stamp pads that I had that were some bright fun colors, but they're super small and they just would not ink the stamp very well. So I went to my Redesign with Prima stamp pad. This one is in black, and I'm just going to go ahead and ink my pad by lightly tapping it over the surface of my stamp. For this pass, I'm going to use my stamp block, and this is a large acrylic block with a handle on it that just attaches to the stamp using a cling, and I'm going to press down on the block on the top of the paper. The block is a nice flat surface, so assuming you're stamping onto a flat surface as well, you should get nice, even, flat stamps. I did several passes like this using my stamp block, and I think my surface wasn't perfectly even and level, and that's why I was getting some unevenness in my stamping. So I kept trying it. This is kind of a trial run, and this is just inexpensive paper, so if I mess up, I'm not too worried about it. I have plenty on the roll that I can use. And my first theory was that my surface wasn't all that level. This is just a workbench, and I do have some pads down underneath me that usually make the surface more level, but maybe they were affecting my surface. So I decided to move this over to another surface, and I'm going to practice on that instead. I'm moving over to the top of a dresser, and I know the surface is perfectly level and it's even and smooth because I've just refinished it. So I'm going to go ahead and try my stamping again using the top of the dresser as my surface instead. So this determined that this wasn't my problem. I was still getting some unevenness in my stamping. I went ahead and did a couple more passes using the acrylic block on the top of my dresser, and I still just couldn't get a nice even stamp. And I know that these do even stamp, so I was trying to figure it out. Sometimes it takes a couple passes to figure out what the error is. You can see here the unevenness in that stamping that was frustrating me. So what I decided to do is go ahead and try my stamping without using the block. So I went ahead and took my acrylic block and got rid of that, and I'm just going to use the clear backing that comes with the stamp itself. You can stick your stamp onto this clear acetate, and it's going to stick again using just the cling. I'm going to fill my stamp using the stamp pad, and then I'm just going to flip it over, and I'm going to use my hands to evenly press. I was placing the stamp by alternating the pattern, so I would flip it one way for one stamp, and then I'd reverse the pattern, and that gave me a nice interesting pattern. You can see here as soon as I pull it up, this answered my problem. For whatever reason, I was not getting an even stamp using the stamp block. So now that I figured out the way to get the best and cleanest design, I'm going to go ahead and continue along this roll of paper, reversing my pattern with my stamp each time. I'm really happy with how these are coming out. So I did need to refill my stamp each time I put the image down, and I just did that by lightly tapping that stamp over the top. I reversed my stamp, matched up that pattern to where I like where it was, and I press it down with my fingers. You want to make sure when you're pressing your stamp down that you're careful not to move the stamp itself. Movement in the stamp is what's going to give you some blurriness in your lines and unevenness. So I'm very careful to press over the top of it evenly with my fingers. I chose a pretty large piece of my stamp so that it wouldn't take me as many stamps to fill this whole paper up. And this one did really nicely. I just kept alternating the design, filling my stamp. You can see here how clean and crisp those lines are once I figured out what the problem was. And I kept going down this entire roll of paper, and it gave me this beautifully hand printed design. You can also fill your stamp using paint, and you would just roll over your stamp using a brayer, a very thin layer of paint. You don't want too much or it's going to give you blurred and uneven lines. I just find that you get the most crisp and even lines using the ink versus using paint. Once I had my paper complete, I went ahead and set that aside, and now I'm going to go ahead and clean my stamp. You want to make sure that you clean your stamp after each use so that you can preserve these well. In this case, I'm just using a baby wipe. I'm going to go ahead and wipe the ink off the top, and then I dried that off and put it back inside the package, and that's how I store my stamps. So now I want to make some custom gift tags, and I'm going to use some redesign with Prima molds. This is a Christmas tree mold, and I'm going to fill it using amazing casting resin. The amazing casting resin, you mix equal parts of A and B. I store mine using these ketchup bottle squirters, squirt it into the cups with equal parts, and then I'm going to stir for about 30 seconds. This is a casting resin that sets up in 10 minutes, so you have to work with it fairly quickly. I only mix enough that I need to fill my mold. And I'm going to go ahead and drizzle into the mold using this silicone cup. Once I get my mold completely full, I've got a little bit of extra resin, so I'm going to go ahead and make these little side swirls on the mold as well. I always try to make sure that I have extra molds out so that I'm never wasting my casting resin. I will put links for everything I'm using in the description for this video, and that includes the stamps from Redesign with Prima, the Redesign with Prima stamp pads, the Redesign with Prima mold that I'm using here, and then amazing casting resin, which is from Alumilite. Once I've got my mold nice and full, I'm just going to use a popsicle stick to find any areas that liquid didn't seep into naturally, and I'm just going to make sure that my mold is completely full. You want to do this while your resin is still liquid. Once it starts to set up, it's going to become kind of a gel-like form, and then you won't be able to work with the resin anymore. I wait about 10 minutes or until the mold turns fully white, and then I'm ready to pop it out of the silicone, and I've got a casting of this Christmas tree mold. Next, I'm going to take a little bit of gilding wax, and this color is called Bronze Age, and I'm just going to use my finger and go over the very high points on this mold to bring out some of the details. This one has gorgeous details in it. Along with the Christmas tree, I cast a few snowflake molds and I attach those to my package. I'm going to use some black ribbon to tie these up in some really pretty bows so it looks really natural and organic. I love how these turned out with my Christmas tree this year, which is black and silver in design. I think this really gives a nice handmade touch to some of my gifts, and it ties in with all my Christmas decor. I think it makes the gifts even more special. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, you can find links for everything I use in the description for this post. You can find more Brush by Brandy on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and YouTube, and on my website at brushbybrandy.com. Don't forget to click that subscribe button.